Hi everyone, before I start, please remember to mute yourself during the workshop using the mute button on your WebEx application, unless you need to speak. Welcome everyone, good morning. Welcome to the PG&E Grid Modernization Plan Workshop. My name is Jamie Lau, a Senior Utility Engineer with the CPUC Electric General Rate Case section, and a coordinator for the PG&E General Rate Case. I'll be facilitating today's workshop with my colleague here, Chris Lopez, who's also a coordinator for the rate case. This workshop is hosted by the CPUC Energy Division to ensure transparency and engagement in PG&E's Grid Modernization Plan as part of their 2027 rate case activities. Before the workshop, let's go over safety briefing and logistics. Be aware of your surrounding and emergency exits. If you experience an emergency, please call 911 and be sure to know your egress points. Ensure a comfortable setup at home or office, either sitting down or standing. The workshop will be about 3 hours long. As for logistics, this is an online-only meeting and is being recorded. Here are some of the useful buttons for WebEx. The mute button for unmuting yourself or mute yourself. Raise hand if you have questions. The chat button for typing in your questions. And the leave button if you need to leave the meeting. Again, the workshop is being hosted by the Commission's Energy Division Electric General Rate Case section, and in collaboration with the Grid Planning Group. We have PG&E as speakers and presenter for the workshop. For all other attendees, you may ask questions in the chat function or raise hand button to speak. There will be Q&A section at the end of each presentation and an open discussion at the end of the workshop where we'll have the chance to call on you and address your questions before ending the workshop. Next, let's go over the purpose of the workshop. This workshop is required under CPUC's decision D1803023, also known as the Grid Mod decision, which mandates investor-owned utilities to present their grid modernization plans 60 days before filing their rate case. The purpose of this workshop is for PG&E to outline their funding requests related to the Grid Mod plan and to provide their 10-year vision for the Grid Mod and to incorporate feedback from stakeholders. So your participation today is highly appreciated. Next, let's go over the timeline related to PG&E's Grid Mod plan from this point forward. We're now in March 2025, where we are holding a workshop as required by the Commission before PG&E filing the rate case. On May 15, about 2 months from now, PG&E will file their 2027 rate case. Around fall 2026, PG&E will provide Grid Mod updates to Energy Division so they can be included in the 2027 biannual legislative report. The legislative report is due on February 7, 2027. Can someone mute in the background? Thank you. And in 2029, PG&E is expected to file a new 10-year vision plan as part of their next rate case filing in 2031. Today's workshop will follow this agenda. We'll spend about 30 minutes on PG&E's 10-year vision for grid modernization, and then the next 100 minutes, including a break, on 2027 grid modernization plan which include 3 items: distribution planning tools, advanced distribution management system, or known as the ADMS, and distributed energy resource management system, or known as DERMS. And we'll spend the rest of the time on open discussion and closing remarks. We'll take a 10-minute break in between the presentation, probably after distribution planning tools. So before handing over the floor to PG&E, please let me know if anyone have questions. So Chris, do we have any question in the chat or raise hand?
One thing, Jessica from the grid planning group wants to speak before we hand it off to PG&E.
Okay.
So I'm going to give some space for that.
Yes.
Great. Thanks, Jamie. Thanks, Chris. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jessica Teese from the grid planning team here at CPUC. Just wanted to pop in here to quickly share some of the questions that we shared with PG&E that we're hoping to hear answers to today. So just want to share with you. So as a general overview, some of the questions we had asked were, what are the key updates or changes compared to the GRC? We would like to hear a high-level summary of those. What are the benefits to the ratepayers? And then kind of going into more detail, retrospective, from project status to budget. Well, what just to help us set the stage, right? What has been previously planned and what's the status of those? What funding was approved in previous GRCs? So we're not here to really just revisit and litigate or really take a closer look at it, but just to help us give us an idea of setting the stage of where we're at, so that we can better understand where we're going as far as the next steps in the remaining 10-year vision plan. As far as what technological, climate policy, and market forces that have evolved since the filing. And then are there any pivots that PG&E is considering based on that evolving landscape, as well as what adjustments he made. So those are some of the questions that we had asked from our team, the group planning team, from PG&E to share with us, and we're looking forward to this presentation. So thanks, everyone. Thanks, Jamie. Thanks, Chris. That's it.
All right, thank you, Jessica. So anyone else have additional comments in the chat or raise hand? Chris?
Nope.
All right. Okay. So now I would like to transition to PG&E's presentation on 10-year vision. Presenting on behalf of PG&E, we have Mr. Alex Portilla. Please take it away.
Great. Good morning, and thanks for having us here. I believe that Jessica Tellis on the PG&E side is going to share slides once we get those up. Excellent. So if you go to the second slide, and we'll start there. So yeah, first I want to thank Commission staff for convening this forum and thank all of you for your engagement here today. As was mentioned, the objective here is for us to present our 10-year vision, an updated 10-year vision, which gets refreshed on the GRC cycle, to provide an outline of what is going to be covered that relates to grid modernization within our 2027 to 2030 GRC ask, and really to get some initial input here from parties and feedback, and to answer questions here in advance of the filing, right? The filing will be in May, and so this is a preview and an opportunity where we're almost there, but it has not been filed yet. So last feedback that we can take into account here as we adjust the filing. So this is an opportunity, again, in a public forum for stakeholders to provide feedback and to ask questions. And we hope that our presentation is responsive to the request from Commission staff. If we go to the next slide. So already talked through this agenda a little bit. We've broken this up into, I'll give an overview of the grid modernization 10-year vision. Then we'll go into 3 of the key components of our 2027 grid mod plan and ask. In each of those, we'll give an update on where we've been, what are the capabilities that we've deployed, what's the progress. We are in the middle of our most recent GRC, and then where we're going. So what is in the next GRC? And we'll take Q&A after each section. So starting with distribution planning tools, going into our advanced distribution management system, as well as the advanced distribution applications that are more forward oriented, and then our distributed energy resource management system. And then there'll be some open Q&A at the end. Just want to introduce myself before I go in. I'm Alex Portilla. I'm the director of our Clean Energy Technology Platforms team. So we are the team that is responsible for one of these key technology pillars here, the distributed energy resource management system, as well as technologies and processes around data sharing. So our Share My Data platform and platforms to support our load management capabilities, including market integration of our demand response program. So a technology team here at PG&E, very much at the center here of the grid modernization plan, and really happy to be here today. So if we go forward to the grid mod vision, what I want to provide a bit of context, context for us as a company, and context for us as an industry and where we stand. If you were to sum up what PG&E, what our aspirations are in one slide, this is what's on this slide. This is what we call our 10-year True North strategy. This is the direction that we're looking to head, and who we want to be, why we exist, to deliver for our hometowns, to serve our planet, to lead with love in all of the interactions that we have with our stakeholders, including our employees, and the stands that we're looking to deliver on behalf of our triple bottom line, our people, planet, and prosperity. And this is I would say a guiding document for everything that we do within this company. We should be able to find the work within this. If you click one forward on that, specifically to grid mod, how does grid mod impact that? It's at the center. Grid modernization is at the center of our 10-year strategy. In particular, it's around how do we build an energy system, how do we architect that system that is resilient to climate change, that is decarbonized on a 24/7, 365 basis, optimized to local and system needs, and really unleashes the full potential of electric vehicles and electrification in general. And I'll talk a little bit more about how that's so central to our strategy here in a moment. We want to do that not just for the sake of the energy system, but we want to do that in service of our customers. How do we build this energy system, provides all of these benefits in a way that is affordable, that provides excellent customer experiences, not just for the customers of our services, but also the stakeholders and within the ecosystem of the energy system here in California. And I think foundational capabilities, how are we going to deliver this energy system for our customers? It's going to be through a set of capabilities that are foundational and cut across. And in particular today, we're going to talk quite a bit about some of the technology platforms and data management capabilities. But obviously it's more to that. It's everything that is brought to the table. All right, if we can go to the next slide. So we talk about serving the planet, and I would encourage folks to look at PG&E's climate report and some of our aspirations here around our commitments to being a company that is not just achieving climate neutrality, but climate positivity, and not just on behalf of our company, but on behalf of the customers that we serve, because we have a huge role in individual carbon emissions that and a very important role in helping our customers to reduce the impacts that they have. So if we think about our 2030 carbon emission goals, it's reducing our scope 1 and scope 2, those things mostly in our control, as well as scope 3. We're going to do that in a number of different means. That includes decarbonizing our electric supply. So that is the energy that we procure on behalf of our customers, which is already quite clean, but in continuing to invest in renewable electricity, but also our gas system and our commitment and our goal of providing more renewable gas, especially for those gas areas in the gas system that are hard to electrify. And so how are we going to reduce the carbon footprint of our customers? That's largely on electrification and efficiency. We have a goal of getting 3 million electric vehicles fueled using our electric system in the 2030 time horizon. That is a huge increase of what we have today. We've made a ton of progress there. Our customers, over 600,000 of our customers are already fueling their transportation with electricity from our increasingly clean grid. It includes a huge and continued practices on energy efficiency and helping our customers consume less energy overall, but especially at the times that are most carbon intensive and that provide the most cost within our system. And we're doing that, what is our role in doing that is not just on programs, but also workforce education within the general workforce, that it really needs to make a major transition in how we are designing homes, how we are building homes, and how we are providing, heat and electricity to customers. And we're working on zonal electrification and gas transition, and particularly in areas that are hard to reach and the market might not serve. So this is an important context and background context for grid modernization, because this is a large driver of what we're trying to achieve with our grid modernization efforts. You can go one forward. Okay. So if you try, what I would like to boil down is to two huge macro trends that are really important. And one is the challenge. And the challenge and opportunity that we face is around electrification and load increases. And we're seeing a lot of it, and it's really exciting. And so we have new load coming on, as well at the same time as we have customers that are adopting technologies that can both be a challenge for that serving of new load, but also a solution. And so the big trend of load increase, but also adoption of DERs is really at the center of our grid mod needs, right? And the investments that we're making are to, how do we make sure that we most cost effectively can serve this? So there are major drivers, and I'll go through some of them. But obviously on the climate side, it's all around us, and it's accelerated with major wildfires, with increased heat events and extreme weather. And the grid needs to be able to not just operate under those changing conditions, but also to be able to be reliable and resilient to these changing conditions. On the policy side, we are operating in an environment where we have policies that are very aligned and pretty stable in our state that are driving adoption, driving support and requirements for cleaner technologies, and that is via programs, rules, rates, incentives, targets, mandates. All of the different tools in the toolbox are accelerating the adoption of new technology and positioning California to be to deliver on the climate goals of the state. And there are major market drivers. There's adoption of and changing market structures. We have over 2,000 megawatts of energy storage capacity connected to PG&E system. And increasingly DERs are able to participate in either directly or indirectly in wholesale markets. So these are important drivers, and I would say probably the biggest and most exciting is that we have the privilege to serve one of the most dynamic and diverse customer bases in the country, if not in the world. And what that has looked like already is that 1 in 7 electric vehicles in the whole country are in our service territory. We're already serving over 600,000 EVs. We have 1 in 6 solar rooftop customers in the country. That's over 850,000 of our customers out of 5 million are bringing 8 gigawatts of generation to the table through their investment. And we have successfully been able to deliver a distribution grid that is stable and reliable while serving all of those customers. And we have 90,000 or 760 megawatts of behind the meter storage connected to our system. So that's what we've been able to do so far, is operate a system that has accommodated all of that has enabled all of that growth in DERs. And what are we going to see in the future? I mentioned 3 million EVs, right? So that is an order of magnitude more demand from fuel switching from one that is going to be coming onto our system. So we're going to see huge load growth. We're going to start to see, we believe we're going to start to see increased adoption of and electrification of other types of loads, such as space heating, hot water heating, and the grid is going to need to accommodate that. So we're looking at 80% more energy demand. Now, what we don't want to do is build 80% more grid capacity to serve that 80% more energy demand. And so how are we going to get there? We need to be able to manage those loads. One of the things about the new load coming online is a lot of it is somewhat flexible. And so a lot of our grid modernization story is around how do we serve those new loads while increasing the throughput of our system. How do we efficiently bring on new loads and harness the capabilities within DERs and flexible load? And at the same time, I think a more recent trend, but a very impactful trend, is going to be how do we serve new business growth? For many years, PG&E and California had flat demand, electricity demand. We're seeing new demand from not just electrification and fuel switching, but from new growth. And new business growth is coming, from data centers, but also from reindustrialization. And it is a major economic driver. And it's really important for us as the grid operator and investing in the system, and all of us in this ecosystem, to make sure that we're able to serve this new load in a timely way, but also in a way that is affordable. So a lot of our success in being able to accommodate new technologies, it's great, we can operate the system, but how do we do that in the most cost-effective way that brings rates down? That is the landscape. That's the context for our overall energy system transformation. And I wouldn't say that there are any fundamental shifts in that context that have happened, but it's basically more. Climate drivers have accelerated. The policy has continued to drive forward in California, with California as a leader. And technology has accelerated faster than maybe any of us had expected. And in particular, in the area of new growth, this is an area of unprecedented growth. And I think an exciting area for PG&E and for our whole industry as we look to transform our system and decarbonize the overall system. So to go one forward, and ultimately what we believe is that this electrified future actually, if done right, this if done right hinges largely on can we transform our system? Can we make the grid modernization investments that and actually make them effective? We believe that the triple bottom line of people, prosperity, and planet can be served by this energy transformation. And largely that's around, how can we help our customers use less energy? That's a big story around fuel switching, right? You look at the gasoline portion, gasoline and natural gas are not as efficient. So how can we bring that into a more efficient system, which is the electric grid, and lower overall use of energy? In doing so and driving a system that has higher throughput, more megawatt hours served with the same megawatt capacity, we believe that we can lower customer share of wallet and lower the bills that folks are spending on their energy consumption, whether today that's with the grid or with other sources, either via natural gas or gasoline. And obviously, one of the main reasons we're doing all of this is around the carbon emission. So this is our climate optimist of the future, but we got to do it right. We got to do it right. So if you go to the next slide, I'll walk through kind of the pillars of our grid mod vision. I already talked about the technology drivers, climate drivers, policy drivers, market drivers, but here I'll talk about the 4 key pillars of our vision. And this is an evolution, not of what our vision that we had set out 4 years ago prior to this GRC, not a revolution of that vision. But it starts with infrastructure. In any future world where we're serving large amounts of new load, we are going to need to invest heavily in infrastructure. This includes wires, poles needed to deliver the new capacity. It includes the automation to operate the grid, to deliver safe and reliable power most efficiently, and the ability to plan for a much more dynamic and interactive future grid system. So the foundation of the grid is the grid. So our grid modernization view is, new investments are going to continue to be needed in the system itself. And the second pillar of our grid mod strategy is around monitoring and control. This includes the sensors, controllers, advanced software analytics, which are moving very fast, to optimize the performance of the system and to manage our assets for a multitude of risks and demands on the equipment. And that is, aging assets, weather events, and more dynamic operating conditions driven by new loads and generation on the distribution system, but also driven by climate-related changes to our operating environment. So that includes our ability to execute public safety power shutoffs, our ability to provide resiliency and minimize the impact of the extreme weather events that we're facing. The third element is around DER grid services, and that includes the capabilities that are required to turn DERs including demand flexibility, into grid assets that can be trusted to reliably deliver services. What services? Capacity, energy, voltage support, operational flexibility, and to deliver these services when needed at the locations where they are needed. And this is represented by a number of different emerging grid services that we'll be talking about a bit later. And then the fourth pillar is around DER orchestration. Orchestrating DERs has a really important role in balancing supply and demand while optimizing the value of DERs across distribution grid, the transmission grid, and the energy system as a whole. How do we make sure that programs and processes are serving multiple needs and are complementary? Today, we have a lot of DERs that participate, or we have some DERs that participate in the wholesale market. But how do we make sure that those same DERs can provide services on the grid day in and day out, rather than just during an emergency scenario at the energy system level? How do we orchestrate the ability of a DER to provide a local service, maybe to help a customer reduce their bill, at the same time as contributing to extending the life of distribution grid assets? So this is around the concept of orchestration. And then how are we going to deliver in these kind of four main areas? Today, we'll be doing a deep dive in three of the areas below, and I'll just give a quick preview. And that is around, so our distribution planning tools. How can we plan for this more dynamic grid of the future? How can we plan for a system where customers are interacting more dynamically with that system via programs, via different rates, in a world where at the state level, we want 7 gigawatts of load flexibility and load shift. So we need new planning tools to be able to help us to make the right investments in the distribution grid. And we'll have a whole deep dive on the investments in that area. Our ADMS, our Advanced Distribution Management System, is a core and fundamental, it's like the OS of the grid, the operating system for the distribution grid. It is the place where we see what is the current state of the system, the flows, the voltage, the switch states. It is the tools that our operators are using day in and day out to manage the distribution system. The third key element is around our distributed energy resource management system. This is how we are going to interact with this more dynamic set of distributed energy resources. How will we interact with them? How will we model them? How will we forecast? How will we signal? How will we orchestrate? And then the fourth element, which we're not going to cover as much here, but we wanted to include it in because it's going to be in other chapters of our general rate case, but it has an impact here, is around taking advantage of the evolution in grid edge computing to support customer electrification, DER management, wildfire risk mitigation, and asset management. At the edge of the grid, in our meters, we have the opportunity to put advanced analytics, and we have the opportunity to interact with customers in new ways via upgrading some of our existing capabilities in that area. So that'll be covered mostly in the GRC chapter, less so here in our GridMod chapter because it covers it into other areas. So with that, I'm going to pause and we'll go into the deep dive. I could take questions on the high level vision right now, but I might defer on the more detailed level to the deep dive presentations that are going to be done following on the planning tools, ADMS, and DERM. And it looks like we
Looks
have
like
a
we
raised
have-
hand.
Please unmute yourself and go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, everyone. This is Anthony with California Advocates. I had a quick question for Alex. I'm curious, I believe on one of your slides, you were talking a little bit about how we're expecting about an 80% of increased energy needs in the next 10 years, and how it's necessary to curb some of that down, and how grid mod contributes to that. And I'm curious if we can expect any data or any estimates in the upcoming GRC grid mod on what these cost savings would be from the grid mod tools you are developing. Basically how PG&E is intending to bring costs down, and how much of the additional 80% energy needs and infrastructure buildup can be curbed down over the next 10 years from the grid mod tools you're developing. Is that something we can expect to see, or PG&E is working on estimating?
I think that, so I'll answer it this way, and I might phone a friend in Bill Peter here in a second, but within the GRC, I don't think we'll be able to identify like exactly how it bends the curve. We're undertaking a study, the Electrification Impact Study Part 2, which is specifically, one of the key elements of that study is looking at how load flexibility can help us bend that investment curve, and we will not have the results of that study in the context of the GRC, but we will be releasing that in the context of the high DER OIR, which I believe the other IOUs are doing something similar. Bill, is that, or Jessica, is that the right location where we would have those numbers?
I mean, that's right in terms of having like a delta to look at of the impact of load flexibility and other modernization efforts. I'll talk about that study in the next section. And then additionally, I mean, as we'll talk through, a lot of our tools are incorporating all that modernization. So in a way, we're building it into our plan. What isn't so easy is to say, what's the delta if you didn't have modernization, right? And that's where the EIS study will provide more of like a delta, so to speak.
And I think that there's one other element around, so our grid modernization plan will provide the capability. So the capabilities around orchestration, for example, or advanced forecasting, the capabilities to be able to provide signals to customers and DER providers. But there are other policy developments that need to be put into place related to, and the programs that need to be able to, for us to engage and compensate, and kind of the rules around how those interactions will work. So within our GRC context, we're talking about what are the investments and capabilities that we will be making, but those are complementary to the overall evolution of, for example, DER grid services and how those end up evolving, impacts the overall benefit and how we bend the curve.
Yeah, I understand that. Thank you. I do think it's a little bit, I guess we're in a position now where we understand that this is kind of a capability that is possible if you develop these tools. But I think there still seems to be kind of a lot, like, how confident do you think with the right things in place that some of that infrastructure reduction can occur? Have you seen any, have you tested or built out what these compensations could look like, or are studying that in the context of any of the pilots so far, where you have some indication or some level of confidence that will happen? Or is there a chance where, things will not align and that might not materialize, besides, some of the climate benefits that you talked about and other benefits that you talked about here? Is there like a level of confidence that you can share in terms of how much, all this grid mod that we're building and developing over the next 10 years, that's going to be a decent amount of cost. If it's actually going to be able to reduce some of these costs of infrastructure, or is it something that is just a possibility that might not even materialize?
We feel pretty confident, but but I also want to recognize the amount of uncertainty. And I would just say, and this probably will be covered somewhat later, in like the how we're going about the investment is we're trying to stay nimble and adaptable to what is in front of us. And so, that's the challenge. We're putting forward we have a 10-year vision. We have, in the context of the GRC, a 4-year investment plan. But within that, we also want to have flexibility to evolve or even, pull back as needed. So I would say, there is an evolving space. I'm pretty confident. We've been working on this for some time. We've done quite a few pilots around what certain capabilities are. Can DERs respond to signals? Can we get services? And there's work aside, or there's work in front of us to get to what does it take a DER to be a firm grid asset. But we think that work is progressing, and we need to be making investments alongside of that. But yes, there are chicken or egg, quite a few chicken or egg issues as we look at building and transitioning to a different type of paradigm where we're interacting and relying on grid flexibility in a way that we hadn't in the past.
Yeah, thank you, Alex. Just one last comment. Yeah, overall, just based on this discussion, I know you guys are in the process of still collecting data and figuring things out on how this works, but anything that could be shared on that aspect within the GRC filing would be really helpful while reviewing that in terms of some of your current insights or some of your current estimates on how this process could work in the horizon in the future, if you have it. But thank you for your answers. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate that feedback, and we'll look to, to the extent that we can, we'll look to quantify benefits. And I think, the other thing I would just say, the grid modernization investments are they're integrated and system type investments. It can be hard to attribute a specific benefit to a specific grid mod investment. For example, changing our planning, like we are talking about changing our planning processes, our operational processes, and then doing so in the context of an evolving market landscape. And so all of those 3 elements, including what customers are now able to deliver and technologies are able to deliver, each one of those has a stake or a claim on some of these benefits. And so it is hard to point it to like, this bending the curve and increasing throughput in this one area is going to, comes from this specific technology enabling investment. But I appreciate the feedback.
And we have Gabe raising his hand. Gabe.
Yeah. Morning, Alex. Gabe Cutland with the Energy Vision. Appreciate those questions from public advocates. I think the extent you can show a illustrative value creation in your GRC filing would be really helpful. So my question continues on DR grid services, and it's at best a concept definition level at this point. And so my question is, what do you see as the primary framework for realizing grid services? I mean, I think we all are familiar with pricing strategies that rely on the customer just to respond to a price signal, but the newer area is where the utility is actually orchestrating or sending signals. So if you could speak a little bit about what the vision is in that area, that would be helpful. As a distribution system operator. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I feel like within the context of today, like we're kind of talking about the investments that we're making. I think that in the the high DER OIR, is where we'd like to push those discussions, but I do, we believe that the distribution system operator as a key orchestrator of this system is in the best position to be able to have visibility of the distribution grid, connectivity to edge devices and participants in different services. And these are the investments that we're making that we think will deliver on that. In terms of like what is our vision for a DSO, whether that is pricing or marketplace, or I would say I'm not prepared to speak to that DSO vision in today's workshop.
Okay, we're a little behind schedule, so I'm going to move us on to the next section. So next up we have Bill Peter and Brad Detjen.
Thanks, Jessica, and thanks, Alex. So I'm Bill Peter. I'm Senior Manager of our Electric Planning Modernization Group here at PG&E. And we've broken up this deck to talk about distribution planning tools first. And part of that reason is that really we have to develop a plan to enable that electric future and that vision that Alex was talking about. So in other words, we have to modernize our grid planning tools if we want to modernize our grid. So I'm going to lay out some of the history of what we've done in terms of the distribution planning tools. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about some pivots we've made and changes of direction. And then we'll conclude with talking through some of the outcomes and benefits and what we see in the future. We've also kind of broken it up a little bit in terms of tools that are through the high DR proceeding and those that aren't, but really all of our tools are really aligned on the same central vision of really we want to focus on customer outcomes and the driving down of affordability and really enabling and integrating electrification and high DERs. So as we go through all that, that's kind of the themes you'll kind of hear about what we're trying to achieve with this modernization of our planning tools. So we move on to the next step, just for some background. So the high DER proceeding, we've already heard mention of it several times. That was launched to really prepare the grid for a high DER and high electrification future. And we want to understand the impact of costs while meeting those customer needs, accommodating load, and maintaining affordable rates. So I'll call out a couple things here. Notice the emphasis on the customer, energization, and affordability. And those really line up very well with the True North strategy and the vision that Alex was talking about. So really a lot of what we're going to talk about is like kind of trying to orient our tools to achieve that. That proceeding is broken up into 3 different tracks. The most of what I'm going to talk about is in track 1 and distribution planning and execution. But again, you need those tools to really achieve the other 2 of distribution operations and smart inverter operations. Alex touched on this. We've seen a lot of electrification grow. So we've seen an evolving landscape, right? And so we'll talk through about how that's resulted in some of the pivots of our tools, right? We've all heard about how we have an accelerating energization growth is what we're forecasting. But additionally, right, we're seeing accelerating demand for energization, right? So as PG&E is really focused on how can we deliver that improved outcomes for our customers in terms of energization. And then lastly, there was a decision recently in October that really laid out and really kind of steered the ship on a lot of how those tools should be oriented. And on that same note, while these tools are part of our philosophy here is we want to develop our tools for how we do our work at PG&E, but it also is very customer facing. So we want to make those tools visible, transparent, the outputs of those tools, and really bring that customer along on that journey. So moving to the next slide. Okay, so let's look back at the history here a little bit. So, really, and kind of really speaking about like what was in the last GRC and what we've done and how we've pivoted. So a big focus of the prior work of our tools was to create a distribution investment deferral framework. And there was several different elements to this. So the first was transparency into our distribution planning process. This was done through providing annual reports, our grid needs assessment, our distribution deferral opportunities report. And, realistically looking back, distribution planning, and this actually is true of a lot of different utilities, is a little bit of black box to customers. So this is about opening that up and making that really visible and transparent, because customers, as we've learned, they're very interested in what our plans are to serve their energization needs. So that was a major outcome and really focus of the past, and really, I feel like a big accomplishment of what's been achieved over the last few years of bringing really enhanced visibility and transparency into the planning process. We'll touch on this in a little more detail, but we also had a deferral framework that we set up where we solicited and contracted for DERs to provide grid services. And there's a lot that we've learned and adapted and now have pivoted in terms of that deferral framework. And in particular, we've reprioritized our reporting to focus more on the distribution planning and execution process and the outcomes for customers. And again, I'll dive into that more as we go forward. Another big part of what we've done is establish our integration capacity analysis. So this is really quantifying the amount of power that can be injected or drawn from. So it's really for load, energization, and for generation, interconnection, right? And it's trying to get a sense of like, where is their hosting capacity on the grid. We initiated a bunch of improvements that are underway right now. So looking back, ICA was first developed using really historical data, right? And so it gave you a picture of like what was the hosting capacity as of now, or as looking at the history of AMI data and metering data. And so we've pivoted now to say really what customers, they don't want to know what the history was of hosting capacity. They want to know what the future is going to be, because really they're looking to interconnect load or generation going forward, right? So we've undertaken and are in the midst of a major revision of ICA, where we're going to be taking forecast data, known loads, these are known applications basically, and also planned upgrades. So it's taking into account our distribution plan. And also thinking about it as ICA, we're trying to align ICA more with how we actually do our work, right? When we get an interconnection request or an energization request, we look forward looking. We don't just look at the history. So aligning ICA with our actual business processes. Additionally, we are doing a lot of biannual reporting. A lot of that is about building confidence in our ICA, and I'll talk through some of that in some of the slides to come. ICA is a cutting edge tool, right? And that's not just for PG&E, that's for the industry as a whole. So everything we've done with ICA, we've developed with our vendors. It's not like the vendors had these capabilities and then we're just buying something off the shelf. We're in partnership with these companies to develop the capability of doing this forecasting and modeling. And so it's about evolving that, and not just for us, but also for the industry, about how hosting capacity can be provided to customers. And then lastly, another big effort that we've been working on and have now delivered is our grid resource integration portal. So I've talked about, transparency in the distribution planning. I've talked about ICA data, hosting capacity data, but a big part of that is making sure we provide that to customers in a usable fashion. So we created a portal to host that data, but we learned a lot as we went through that, right? We got a lot of customer feedback about the usability of that portal. And importantly, what we saw actually was dramatic increased use in the portal. So we saw a 2,000% increase in the number of users between 23 and 24. And really, we realized that the prior portal construct, the back end of that portal that we had built, wasn't going to be sufficient for what we were seeing in terms of the use of the portal, in terms of being able to really expand that portal to be able to really leverage the full use of the data. So we've basically launched a revised version of that portal called the GRID portal. Sorry, if someone's on, if someone could go off on mute, who's off mute. And again, I'll dive into more on that in the future slides. But so fundamentally, think there are like three main things we did: distribution planning and the data framework, ICA and hosting capacity, and then our public-facing GRID portal. Move to the next slide. So first, let me explain one of the pivots that we've made. So we ran a distribution deferral program for a number of years, and we executed a number of contracts. And so we learned a lot through that process. We are going to continue to learn from DIVID. So we're excited that our first DIVID contracts are scheduled to come online in June of this year. And so that's really going to be a great test bed to see about the management of such grid services from DERs, the dispatch of such grid services, the potential deferral of investments from such grid services. So, but we've also learned that it's a challenging construct in terms of deferring grid investments. So while we're going to learn from these use cases and have obviously a chance to operate and dispatch the DERs, we've pivoted from a framework of deferring to more of accelerating, right? And that's really in response to customers and that changing landscape of accelerating demand. So now we're pivoting towards how can we bridge and how can we accelerate energizations for customers? How can we provide them the data and the tools and the capabilities that will, and provide solutions for them to bring them on in an accelerated or bridged fashion. So that, if you move on to the next slide, that's, we asked about what kind of pivots we've had. That's the pivot that we've had, is from more of a deferral to a accelerated framework, while keeping all of that reporting and learnings that we've had in going forward. So let me switch to ICA for a second and what's been the history of ICA. So again, we regarding a pivot that we had at our initial run of ICA, and we learned a lot from that. And basically, we learned that just taking the data that we had in our system and running it through to determine hosting capacity really didn't generate the results that were usable for customers. So what we've shown here on this plot is we're showing across all of our nodes in our system. So nodes would be like particular locations on distribution lines. So it's very granular, right? We're not just talking about substations here or feeders. We're talking about particular line sections of our line. So we've taken that result across all of our feeders and basically done a histogram. Oh, sorry, you guys can't see me. Yes, let me. I'm in a different, you can see me maybe in a different video, but I'll turn it on. Sure. So, yes. So then so that what we're showing is by breaking that down in different histograms to the amount of hosting capacity in each node. Each of the color bars correspond to different basically runs that we've done, or snapshots we've taken of our entire system data evolved over time. And so you can see that when we initially ran ICA, we had a lot of zero hosting capacity results, 65%, right? And so we undertook a major initiative to revisit the way we calculated ICA data, where we did a lot. It's called grid model management, where we took data, revised the data up front on before we ran the ICA, and then at the end we could do our error checking rather than kind of waiting through the entire ICA run to determine what the result would be. And that allowed us to adjust the input data, and some of that sometimes is about replacing default settings or things of that nature up front, and be more efficient with what we've done. And so we saw a dramatic improvement really in our ICA results, where now we have pretty stable results and a much bigger dispersion in terms of what kind of hosting capacity we see on our grid. That being said, as I talked about before, all of this, so we feel like we've stabilized that in terms of, like, you know, with the data, that the way the ICA is set up, are we seeing results that we're confident in? But what we now are doing is how can we evolve ICA to make it more useful for customers? And that's really what ICA 2.0 is. It's actually about changing the way we calculate ICA to make it forward-looking versus just historical, because again, that's what really customers want. So we can make ICA as accurate as we want in terms of historical data, but at some point, right, to make it more usable for customers, we really need to make it forward-looking. So moving on to the next slide. So on the last of the 3 pillars that we've talked about, that we've been working on, the Grid Resource Integration Portal. So we launched this in October, and we're going to, and this, again, I spoke about how this is really a back-end tool that's going to allow us to do a new applications and new uses in a much more robust manner, especially given the volume of use that we're seeing for the portal. Excuse me. So by standardizing the interface functions, we can launch new capabilities, and it'll be easier for the user to adapt to that. Filtering, new analysis for the customer. So it's all customer oriented. We've merged our distribution planning and ICA data, and also we've incorporated API, application programming interface capabilities that really will allow different, more sophisticated vendors to go in and really use the data. Additionally, really, we're trying to incorporate this portal much more into our interconnection, our generation interconnection, and our load energization processes directly, because we have portals for those, and then we want to make it seamless, the use of this portal with the customer experience in terms of submitting those applications. Okay, so let's move on to the next slide. Okay, so what's going forward? So I've kind of previewed some of this. So the first is that pivot we talked about from that DITIF to the distribution planning and execution process. So we've provided a lot of transparency, as we talked about, into distribution planning, and we've really focused on the tools on that. But a big portion of that is what's the outcome of that plan. And so one pivot is to really try to look at not just the plan, but what's the execution and the customer impacts of that plan. Additionally, we've heard a lot from customers about the need to incorporate their needs better into our planning process, right? And so we're doing a lot on pending loads, equity, and then similarly expansion of our reporting. And we want to improve our forecasting and doing more bottoms-up forecasting, again, incorporating what we're hearing from customers. And then scenario planning. We'll touch on this later. So I'll revisit most of these in the coming slides. So I'll move on to ICA. So on ICA, I talked a lot about how we're moving from historical to future. Oh, sorry, yeah. And then I'm going to dive into the load ICA use case. One thing that to mention here is that we've also enabled limited generation profiles, both, and that's in terms of our ICA, but also in terms of that GRIP portal. And that's really to enable a new use case for generators that may be seeking to have a profile that has their generation actually limited at times in order to avoid upgrades. And I think I've talked about the GRIP portal already in terms of what we have going on in the future. So diving in to the distribution planning and execution process. One of the big things that we're undertaking is trying to take community input more into the distribution planning. So we've heard from customers that some frustration about their inability to really let PG&E know about their plans early, and that really they're looking for us to be prepared for when they have energization needs, that we can meet those needs in a timely fashion. We've heard that through direct communication with customers, but also through workshops that have been held, right, where the communities were engaged and they gave feedback on the utility's performance. So there's 2 main things we have going on this. The first is we've launched a questionnaire where we're reaching out to different customer groups, right? These federal tribes, environmental and social justice groups, local governments, city councils, but also individual customers and try to get information about their development plans. So these customers may not be ready to submit a particular load application or energization application request, but they have plans information, right? And so in order to, given the fact that it takes, for capacity upgrades, it can take several years, we want to start understanding that information and start incorporating into our planning process. This is very related to that pending loads concept that we already talked about. Additionally, we'll be filing a community engagement plan in May that will lay out more, not just on the questionnaire, but more about how we're going to use this data, how we're going to reach out to customers, how is that feedback and interaction going to work with customers. So again, it's about orienting our planning process more towards what the customer is asking for. Moving on to the next slide. So we mentioned this earlier. Another major undertaking we have launched is our Electrification Impact Study, or our EIS Part 2 study. And so, the first study was performed, right, to look at the estimate potential costs for electrification on the distribution grid. We couple of pivots here on what we're doing. So the first is we're starting to take more of a scenario-based approach for this EIS study. And the second is we're trying to have the outcomes of the study. Obviously, we're very interested in what the report will tell us under these different scenarios and about the how to plan for a high electrification future. But we're also looking to integrate this into our planning process. So it's not just in terms of process, but also our tools. So by having the IOUs lead this study, we're basically we're approaching the study using our tools that we have so we can learn and incorporate this type of analysis into our future planning processes. So that's true. So we're forecasting for 2030, 2035, and 2040. So we're expanding our time horizon of planning, right? That's already happening, but this study will also help us understand how to best do that. Scenario planning, right? We're looking at different scenarios. We have our base case scenario. We have an equity scenario. So that allows us to look at how can we have better equity outcomes for customers in our planning process. We have a flexibility scenario. How can we better incorporate load flexibility into our load planning? And then we have a bottoms up TE forecast. How can we take bottoms up data that we have and have that inform our forecast in a better way? So each of these scenarios is really targeted around how can we improve our planning process, not just for the purposes of this report, but improve planning. And even just in a broader sense, having multiple scenarios, right, is part of what we want to achieve in terms of our planning long term. So incorporating that scenario planning into our planning processes. That study is underway. We expect preliminary results in Q3 and concluding in Q4 2025. But again, a big part of this doesn't just end there, right? We have a report, but then it's about how do we take that and integrate that into our future DPP or DPEP cycles. The next slide. Okay, so the load ICA internal use case is another future-looking application that we're looking to do. I'm not going to, given time, I'm going to move a little quickly through this slide, but basically, what we're trying to do here is integrate load ICA into our energization process. So one of the things we've heard from customers is a frustration is when they submit their applications, they find out months later that there's a capacity constraint. So how do we accelerate that process to be much earlier on, to have, and in the slide on the bottom, you'll kind of see, rather than being after design or 2 to 6 months later, we find out that there's a capacity constraint. Let's move that right up front into the intake process and be able to communicate with customers in a more timely fashion about potential capacity constraints, and then start to work with them on finding mitigations or accelerating or bridging solutions. We look to launch this by the end of 2025, and we'll report out on its impact. So there's definitely an immediate customer benefit that we're targeting, but a bigger picture, by bringing load ICA into our energization process, it's really aligning this tool as a customer-facing tool with our internal processes, right? So that any changes we make in the future on load ICA it now is going to be not, we don't want to create a situation where we have something that's separate for customers and then a separate for how we actually do the work, right? So to bring those, part of the purpose here is to bring those two together. Okay, so next slide. Okay, so now I'm going to move over to Brad, who's going to talk a little bit about what's happening a little more behind the scenes in terms of our software platforms to enable some of the things that we've talked about. So go ahead, Brad.
Thank you, Bill. Yeah, so I'm Brad Detton. I'm manager of our area planning and tools team within distribution planning. And Bill has walked us through major advances and future plans for tools related to the high DER proceeding. I'm going to be talking a little bit about tools that are not directly related, but are more infrastructural. So in this GRC cycle, we have placed two major integrated planning software releases into production and begun using them in our annual distribution planning process. So these are the core software platforms that are used by our 9 local offices of distribution engineers to study capacity needs on our system and propose projects to address them and bring customers online. And these are an integrated tool set. On the one tool set is our load flow modeling platform, which is based on SIME from Eaton. And the other is our forecasting platform from Integral Analytics, which is LoadSeer. Both of these had a major new release in 2023 that was co-developed as a culmination of many years of effort between us and our vendors to build out new features that would enable the high electrification feature that Alex gave us the walkthrough of in the beginning. So the advances on the SIME side are that we've moved to a web-based distribution planning platform. So we are now hosting our load flow modeling on cloud servers, which means that we can move to a manage by exception process. So we can initiate a batch analysis of all of our circuits, and then identify any model cleanup issues or any abnormal conditions that an engineer needs to address. The engineer pulls them down from the cloud. They begin designing a mitigation on their laptop, and then they push it back up and restart analysis from there. That unlocks the ability to use expansive server computation resources to study more hours of the year, more sections of the grid, and more scenarios in the future. And is fundamental as we move in the direction of time series modeling and scenario planning. As we developed that tool, we sought to make sure that it was integrated in an automated way with our forecasting engine as well as other internal tools. And I'll talk a little bit more about that on the next slide. And the major advancement on the LoadSeer side was releasing LoadSeer 4.0, which for us meant transitioning from a historical load basis that was traditionally based on thousands of SCADA devices on the system to now taking our historical load basis data from millions of customer AMI meters and taking full advantage of all of the sensing capabilities that we have at those farthest edge devices, bringing those back into our system to improve the spatial resolution of our load disaggregation and our feeder level load flow modeling. SIME pulls that data back in and undertakes the primary voltage load flow modeling. LoadSeer also is hosting hourly feeder shapes, and these two new platforms work together to improve our ability to model load diversity by combining incoming load hourly shapes with feeder and bank historically informed base shapes and forecasts, so that we are not making worst case scenario assumptions about the load that a new customer will come online with, but we are overlaying the new customer load shape with the feeder shape as well. So those are the two major advances, and let's move to the next slide. I'll talk a bit more about how these platforms work together. So as I mentioned, we've sought to automate the data connections between these platforms as much as possible. And I'll start from the bottom right, which is the outputs to the system. These platforms are used as part of our standard day-to-day business process for new business reviews as they come in, for large load studies that we collaborate on with substation and transmission planning, but also for our annual grid needs assessment. And how the data flows through the system, starting from the upper right, we develop our annual load forecast updates by taking in the last year of hourly AMI data from, as I mentioned, millions of customer AMI meters. We aggregate those and cast forward using the IPER into a forecast of the next 12 years or more of bank and feeder load. We base those forecast disaggregations on third-party customer propensity adoption models that we've developed in collaboration with consultant partners over the last several years, and which we're revising significantly with our EAS Part 2 study. And then once we have those load forecasts at the bank and feeder level, engineers can log into SIME and begin importing that load data into our SIME platform. That's also what happens when we run SIME analysis on the servers. Pulls in that load and identifies abnormal conditions. Engineers design projects. Now SIME is taking in our comprehensive view of our distribution planning network, first of all, from our EDGIS platform, our mapping system, where we run regular gateway updates that pull in updates on the map, but also a streaming view of new service applications that are coming in from our SAP system. So we have full visibility of all the new incoming loads that are coming in, when they're needed, what their magnitude is. Engineers adjust their shape and begin planning for them. SIME exports its projects and transfer plans to LoadSeer, which applies them at the bank and feeder level to verify that there are no off-peak overloads that need to be addressed, and identifies any larger projects that need to be undertaken. So again, in service of this goal of delivering clean and affordable energy, we've been trying to build out an integrated tool set that has these hourly modeling capabilities, has access to expansive server resources, and has scenario forecasting as a fundamental part of their feature set, so that we can move in the direction that we're supporting with the high DER proceedings and otherwise. Let's move to the next slide. So looking beyond this GRC cycle into the projects that we're proposing in 2027 and beyond, I want to focus on these three projects that are not specifically related to the high DER proceeding, but which we'll be proposing in the GRC. So an enhanced automation project. This builds on the successful implementation of the distribution planning automation project and the SIME Fit tool, and enhances our ability to automate studies and designs in a single platform. We'll automate additional types of studies like N-1 contingency studies and protection studies. We will seek to automate the recommendation of mitigation designs, both traditional and non-wires mitigation designs, so that engineers can spend less time modeling different alternatives and more time assessing the costs and benefits to the customer of those different alternatives. And we will seek to understand as developments in the industry bring machine learning and AI capabilities into distribution planning tools, and as those are proven to be accurate and reliable, we'll seek to take advantage of those through this project, as they become available, and eventually integrate our planning into a single pane of glass, so one platform for engineers to log into. The second project is our asset utilization planning capabilities project, and this will develop our tools to model non-traditional solutions that take advantage of available off-peak capacity as a capacity solution or as a bridging solution. This will be building on top of the capabilities of the time series analysis project, like the LoadSeer's hourly forecasting capabilities, and enable us to study the impacts of load shifting on hourly distribution load shape and the resulting effect on peak and off-peak loading. A key outcome of this will be an improved understanding of the effects of increased off-peak loading on load factor, which will inform any changes to standard planning limits that are necessary to preserve asset health and operational flexibility. Because if we're decreasing peak load by increasing a load the rest of the day or the rest of the year, that can have an impact on our ability to perform maintenance by doing operational switching, or an impact on the longevity of our assets, and we need to understand those trade-offs. This will be integrated as much as possible with our DERMS platform to help us identify opportunities to use DERMS for local load flexibility to address capacity constraints. And it'll both enable us to forecast the effects of system-wide trends in increased load flexibility, like utility programs and rate designs, as well as the ability to use load flexibility as a mitigation solution and propose it as an alternative to a traditional project. And the last project to focus on is our transmission and distribution planning alignment project. This is seeking, as we undertake more long-term plans with pending loads and scenario planning, it's essential that our transmission and distribution plans are moving in the same direction. And as we propose distribution projects, that we understand the cost trade-offs on the transmission side, so that when we propose a project, it is co-optimized across both platforms. So essentially, this is enabling us to understand the impacts of transmission load flow on distribution power quality, and also the impacts of distribution load growth on transmission constraints. Let's move to my last slide here. So to bring it all together, we're investing in our distribution planning tools to enable the vision that Alex outlined: a reliable electrified energy system optimized to local and system needs, delivering affordable energy and efficient customer energization. In the interest of affordability, I'll emphasize, through the evolution of our DPEP, we're providing greater transparency into our investment plans and improving outcomes by considering pending loads and alternative forecast scenarios. With the ability to model increased asset utilization, we're going to identify opportunities to more cost efficiently enable load energization. We're seeking to improve customer outcomes by giving customers access to more data through the load ICA and enhanced automation projects to help accelerate customer electrification plans, to increase customer engagement with our distribution planning process so that we know about long-term plans sooner and can initiate long-term projects to serve these areas that are seeing large amounts of growth. And in the interest of reliability, automating additional studies and just understanding the impacts of increased asset utilization so that we can redefine our planning limits as necessary to preserve asset health and operational flexibility. Bill, are there any other things you wanted to emphasize and benefits here?
Yeah, I think just one area that maybe I didn't touch on as fully as I would have liked during the presentation earlier was when thinking about modernizing our planning tools, a big area is we're seeing increased load flexibility come onto the grid. So it's about orienting our tools to plan for that future with higher degrees of load flexibility. So if you think about, ICA, that's a time-based analysis, right? So it's a tool that's really well oriented towards that type of approach. If you think about a lot of what we're doing in terms of the EIS study and looking at that load flexibility scenario, and then also building it in to the planning process as we go forward. We also have an EPIC project that we'll talk about a little bit more later, where we're talking about how can we improve our forecasting of load flexibility into the planning process, as well as how can we use it as part of our solutioning. So that's a real benefit that we see going forward, is better able to take that load flexibility that's going to be on the grid and really maximize its usage in terms of our planning and making sure we're using that to make the grid more affordable for customers.
We're at the end of our section for distribution planning. I believe we have a break scheduled right now, but any
Yes.
questions before we?
There's a question.
Oh, go ahead, please.
Someone put in the chat that where do fault studies fit into the picture?
Yeah, so end-of-line fault current studies are integral in our new business review process, as well as we undertake wildfire safety initiatives and install new devices and new protective modes throughout our system. Our protection team is constantly reevaluating end-of-line fault current and ensuring our devices can see end-of-line. We are, through the enhanced automation project, seeking to make protection study is an integral part of our web-based planning analysis. And so that's something we want to make more visible, so that even when we're not undertaking a specific new business review or new protective device design review in an area, that we are updating our protection studies on a regular basis with that improved understanding of new loads in those areas and otherwise.
Okay, and we have Anthony raising his hand.
Thank you. I do have a question, I believe, for Bill. Regarding ICA 2.0, I think you touched on that briefly. My understanding is that this will add forecast data, known loads, and planned upgrades into the ICA. One thing that PG&E presented on recently regarding the ICA was that some of the circuits may take between a month to a year to update in 1.0. That's to incorporate new loads, generation, device changes, etc. My question is, if you can share on whether the addition of all these elements in 2.0 could potentially impact or lead to more delays in monthly refresh, and if so, if you can share on whether PG&E may plan to ask for additional funds in the GRC for either computational or human resources to mitigate that, to meet the needs of 2.0 and maintain the requirement for refresh, basically.
Yeah, great question. Thanks, and it's a clear question, so thank you. So, our approach on ICA 2.0, I don't foresee, other than having to make the integration and the change over, not having it's effectively the same scale of calculation. What we're also doing, though, is changing vendors at the same time to align it more with our actual distribution planning process. Because again, we want to have it sync up, because now we're looking forward. We want it to have the same data, the same approaches, and we're actually using the same vendor for both. So we're making an investment on that front too. But once that's made, I think it'll actually be more efficient, both in terms of our server costs, which is actually a big component of the expense of ICA, and just the efficiency of how since the data will be more aligned with what we're data more familiar with, we're hoping that will provide benefits as too. So I think if any, I think our goal here is to actually speed up the refresh rate of the ICA without having to make it really scale up the servers. The one caveat to that is, to the extent that there's new ICA applications, such as like a limited load profile or something in the future, that there's potentially very significant costs that we need to be considered in something like that. So that's where on our load ICA use case, we've had a more efficient, rather than doing a full ICA calculation for that, we're trying to be more efficient with how we do that to keep the costs down. So I think ICA is, very computationally intensive. So we're definitely, by making this transition, we're hoping to bring some of that down. And to answer your question directly, I do not think that ICA 2.0, that transition will result in delayed and slower refresh rates, or the need for scaling up of resources to keep the same refresh rate.
Thank you. That's good news. My understanding is that it might result in the opposite potentially, and there will be maybe more efficiency in these refresh rates.
That's right. I mean, anytime you make a transition, right, there's always I don't want to say this year's going to be super smooth, but I think that, I think long term, that's definitely the plan.
Thank you.
Okay, we have Edmund Dale have his hand up after Anthony.
Hi, thanks, Edmund Dale on the IRP team from CPUC. It sounds like you guys are making a lot of improvements to your planning capabilities and forecasting capabilities, and I see that here on the slides that there are plans to integrate these with DERMS. I'm curious if you're going to talk more about that today, Yeah.
Yes, we will be talking more about that.
And
And I think we're talking through some of like the use cases and how that relates to some of the things I've discussed. Yeah, my thought is maybe let's revisit this after the DERMS, and then we have time at the end to set aside for more broad discussion if you're okay with that, because I think it'll give more context for the questions and the discussion.
okay, yeah. And then just one follow-up. Are there plans to do this in a type of integration during this GRC or the 2027, 2030 GRC?
Sorry, can you repeat the question? I didn't quite catch the start of it.
Are there specific plans to do this integration with DERMS in the 2027 to 2030 GRC?
And when you're saying integration, you mean integration of the planning tools with DERMS?
Yeah, I'm thinking like actual using these forecasts and using this new data to actually control assets. Is that something that is going to happen during that time period, or do you think that's something that's further out?
Well, yeah, I can speak to this. So, DERMS, when it's in being used in, say, our Flex Connect application, is making use of day ahead forecasts to send load profile limits to controllable assets. And our distribution planning process is developing annual forecasts so we can set limits. And so they're operating on different timescales. It's not, the goal is not to have one forecast feed directly into the other or vice versa. But what is planned and what we're proposing in this asset utilization project is to be able to model the ways that DERMS could move load to other off-peak times, so that we can propose DERMS controlled load flexible assets as a mitigation alternative for distribution capacity.
Okay, that makes sense. Thanks.
Okay, I don't see any more hands or questions in the
Sorry, I
chat.
think Richard, you just lowered your hand. Did you have a question?
Yes, Richard Coe here from the Public
sorry.
Advocates
Okay,
Office.
sorry, Richard.
Yeah.
Yes.
Just to follow on from Bill's response to Anthony's question, I just wanted to understand the impact of the ICA changes in the upcoming GRC and whether you'll be breaking out any ICA related costs separately in the GRC.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. Because ICA is a big component of, again, the server costs and the running of the ICA. So that will definitely be part of our forecast. As to like exactly how the work papers will look, I'll have to go back, and I mean we're still in development, right? But yes, it's definitely, and the explanation of the components of that and all that. So ICA is definitely spelled out as its own and explaining what the costs are regarding ICA.
Great. It's just that in GRC, some GRCs in the past, possibly not necessarily PG&E, ICA has just been lumped into a broader category of tool, and it's sometimes hard to identify which costs actually pertain to the ICA. So yeah, anything you can do in that respect would be great.
Okay, understood. Thank you.
And I see Anthony's hand up again.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm just following up on that again with another follow-up question. On that as well, I believe there's a memo account that it has been tracking ICA costs. So can you share on whether we will see? Are you going to attempt to recover these costs in this GRC or following one? I don't think we've reviewed that memo account in a previous PG&E GRC, so I'm sure there's some costs on there. And if so, if you can share a little bit, since these costs are basically going to be reviewed for reasonableness in the memo account, to what extent of detail are these costs are going to be split up in terms of where these costs went to fund which additional aspects of the ICA that weren't previously accounted for? I'm just trying to think about how much detail we're going to have to review these costs in the memo account since we haven't seen them yet.
Yeah, we're what we call the DRP TMA memo account. And yes, that is correct. The ICA costs will be a portion of what's in there, and we'll try to make sure it's clear about what's their contribution. I think as we go through though, like the GRC process, right? That's where there's always an opportunity to request more data, more questions, and things of that nature. But your feedback is definitely understood and clear that there's a definitely like understanding how ICA contributes to what goes into that memo account. I think that's really what the ask here is, to make that as clear as possible. So that's understood. And just laying out that there'll be a process, right, that the GRC will do where we will provide justification for the request. Is that answer? I think we're on the same page. I just want to make sure that is.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you taking that comment into account. That's basically what I kind of wanted to allude to. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
And Richard have a comment in the chat that regarding the GRC process, ideally as much detail as possible will be included in your original May application rather than parties having to request it. So that's a comment.
Understood. Thank you. So I think we can take a break here.
Yep.
We originally had 10 minutes, but maybe we'll do 8 minutes and come back at 10:45, if that's okay with everyone. So 8-minute break and we'll resume at 10:45. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Okay. Now the time is 10:45. We're back from our break.
Thank you. Okay, so our next section is around ADMS and our advanced distribution applications. Chris, please go ahead. Let me just confirm he's back on just a second.
I am back on. Hi, I'm here.
Great, thank you.
Perfect. Sorry about that. Hi, everybody. My name is Chris Ruff. I'm a senior manager here on the ADMS team, and it's my pleasure to discuss the PG&E's ADMS journey and our investment plans for the ADMS product. Next slide, please. So what is ADMS? ADMS stands for Advanced Distribution Management System. It's important to think about it as one system, providing a single pane of glass to operators, providing them visibility of critical information to operate our grid. Yeah, I like what Alex Portilla said earlier in the call, where he equated the ADMS system to the grid OS. I think that's very relevant. You can think of the ADMS system sitting in a web of different systems and that control our grid, and ADMS sits in the center of that with many inputs and outputs to those various systems, depending on where we're at in our implementation strategy. In our current GRC, we've outlined the ADMS deployment in 3 distinct releases. Release 1 being SCADA, which is fundamental to the overall application, bringing in and marrying our GIS information with our SCADA telemetry, providing a seamless control and oversight of those field resources. For Release 2, we focus on our outage management system functionalities in the areas of trouble call management, outage reporting and notification, planning outage management, crew dispatch and management, storm management, and our public safety power shutoff settings initiatives. It's really bringing in all our different operational strategies into the ADMS platform, and again, utilizing the system to drive better efficiencies and align on those different practices. And then with Release 3, Advanced Distribution Apps, we start to move the needle with automation, and when in areas of fault location isolation and service restoration are also referred to as FLISR. And I'll discuss this more, but we have a pilot in load flow state estimation, as well as start our ties with our DERM system, or Distribution Energy Resource Management System, as well as enhancing, as well as delivering a new functionality on our enhanced power line safety settings initiatives, including, and it also includes load seer, load sensor, and line sensor integration, and microgrid enablement. It's important to note that ADMS is not just a single solution or a technology solution. The ADMS project and what we've been delivering, and we believe we have met our commitments in the current GRC. We are delivering a holistic approach that includes not only a review of our solutions, but how we use those tools, our process and procedures, data cleanup, new tie-ins, and the cleanup of existing integrations as we port them over to the ADMS system from legacy systems. Next slide, please. These are just a few of the key benefits that we believe the ADMS system provides to our customers and to the overall operation of the grid. First being safety. As I've alluded to already, we're reducing the cybersecurity risk by retiring legacy systems that no longer support modern security practices and procedures. hardening our grid infrastructure, and again, also improving the overall operational efficiency of the actual systems themselves, meaning that are controlling the grid. We're reducing the risk of operator error through improving situational awareness by reducing the number of applications that they are utilizing in grid control and the need for them to manually copy data between multiple systems and multiple screens, again, improving their efficiency and oversight. We're enhancing future visibility with future solutions in the areas of thermal, voltage, and protection to be able to identify and account for issues sooner. Regarding customer benefits, these solutions will streamline our outage response and processes to be able to restore customers in a more quickly in a manner and a more fine-tuned manner on our distribution system, leveraging a model-based FLISR scheme while reducing the overhead of our FLISR maintenance by having it in the consolidated architecture of ADMS. In addition, we'll reduce customer energy usage, peak demand, and energy procurement costs through future enablements of volt-VAR optimization solutions. Looking at DER integration, improving management of DER-related grid issues through real-time awareness of mass load and of DER impact on thermal, voltage, and protection issues. This is foundational to the realization of our DERMS value stream. Looking at operational efficiency, again, I mentioned before, we are streamlining the use of the operators and the amount of systems they need to interface with. So we're reducing those systems by approximately 10 to streamline not only what they're using, but the integration and the operational practices between those various different systems. We're improving efficiency with our EPSS and PSPS initiatives by taking some of the more manual tasks and automating them, bringing those initiatives into the ADMS platform, so the ADMS platform can help our grid operations actually coordinate these initiatives in conjunction with our other initiatives like FLISR. We're providing a platform that provides intelligent and integrated alarm and alarm filtering, so the operators can be aware of how the system is performing and be able to quickly identify where there are potential troubles on the system. And in addition, with our OMS release, we're bringing in automation within our switch log, digitizing in large part of our switch writing process, and with the goal of not only improving our switch writing process, but also introducing automation that will identify and perform checks to identify switching clashes in our plan writing. Next slide, please. This is a little bit of a status update. This slide is a combination of a status update of where we're at, again, on our existing GRC filing and where we plan to go with our future 2027 to 2030 GRC. So the ADMS application, the ADMS project, as we know it today, started in 2018 with our RFPs and our vendor proposals and down selections. In 2023, we delivered the first part of the ADMS solution, which was the ADMS SCADA pilot, where we cut over 5 of our 19 regions with the SCADA functionality in that integrated model that I mentioned earlier, incorporating and interlacing our GIS information with our SCADA telemetry. Also in 2023, we implemented the load shed functionalities, as well as we standardized our microgrid enablement in our SCADA. So part of our data cleanup and part of our process reviews, we implemented new templates and standardizations on how microgrids were, and microgrid telemetry was brought into the system and presented in the operating theater. In 2024, we continued to expand our deployment of ADMS SCADA, cutting that solution over to all regions within our service territory, as well as started cutting over our Flizzr functionality from our existing Yukon feeder automation product. Again, integrating not only the model and the SCADA telemetry, but now also the functionality of Flizzr into a single platform. And then in 2024, we also started our initial tie-ins and integrations and supported DERMS with the ADMS system, feeding telemetry and SCADA to the DERMS system. The benefits, one of the benefits of this approach is we retired a legacy SCADA control system that is in support of an integrated approach and a modernization from not only an operations and maintenance perspective, but from a security practices perspective. This year, we are expanding our Flizzr deployment to account for over 1,000 feeders across our entire service territory. In addition, later this year, we will be deploying a new application that PG&E has co-developed with our vendor around enhanced power line safety settings, EPSS, which will again automate some of the manual tasks that are currently being performed today, allowing us to have a quicker response time to EPSS enablements and disablements in support of fire mitigation, while coordinating with our other operational practices within that ADMS platform. In addition, this year we have planned to deploy our line sensor integration, stabilizing our line integration data, bringing into, again, that common platform so that operators have better visibility of what's happening on our system by bringing in this telemetry set, as well as having the opportunity now to feed it into some of our automation routines. Load flow state, we have a load flow state estimation pilot where we are looking at 14 substations and 54 feeders off of those substations. This is a pilot to really not only gain some understanding about load flow state estimation from our vendor's solution and understanding our vendor's solution in this space, but as well starting to formulate our plans and deployment strategies and process and procedures around how we will plan to have a greater deployment of load flow state estimation and maintain that over the years to come. And then in 2026, we have our big bang delivery of our OMS solutions that I previously mentioned, which will include the consolidation of approximately 10 different applications that provide OMS capabilities today. I should note that our Flizzr expansion will have a significant impact on our SAIDI and KD matrix and improvements. And in addition, again, I think I already mentioned, but our EPSS and PS, with the automation of EPSS and PSPS, will bring greater levels of efficiency within the ADMS system. Looking forward to 2027 through 2030. In 2027, we're planning on enabling a field solution where an application that mimics the ADMS environment in the field, and I'll talk more about that coming up in a future slide, as well as we're looking at enablement of load flow state estimation across 500 feeders, and then in 2030 we're looking at deployment of load flow state estimation across 500 feeders. In 2029. We're planning for an upgrade where we deliver advanced capabilities of ADMS. We believe that our vendor is offering some great enhancements to their platform, specifically in the areas of data integration and data lakes, as well as potential AI capabilities. And we have plans to actually upgrade our system to the latest and greatest capabilities there. 2030, also, we're looking at deploying forecasting and protection engineering analysis tools and applications. Next slide. Focusing again on our 2027 and beyond cycles. This is really the enablement of our advanced applications, the enablement in our advanced feature sets, specifically in the areas of volt-var optimization, load flow, state estimation expansion, forecasting, engineering analysis, and field switching. I equate AMS much to flying an airplane. The existing systems that we've had today essentially is flying an airplane with analog controls, basically having the horizon, your airspeed, and basic telemetry. The enablement of these functions and features and the foundation that we're laying in our next GRC with 2027 moves us into a modern era, again, utilizing an analogy where we have advanced aeronautics capabilities in the areas of example, like having a radar ahead of you where you can actually see storm patterns and be able to navigate through them without having to actually fly and take the risk of flying through a storm pattern. Next slide. I want to focus on volt-var optimization. Today feeders have various different volt-var optimization assets on them. They have LTCs or load tap changers. They have voltage that sit at the substations. They have voltage regulators that are at the substation level and on the distribution feeders, as well as capacitor controllers that are also can be at the substation or on the feeders. Today, these devices operate and resolve volt-var or support volt-var and voltage at their individual locations, solely based on what they can sense at their specific sites. These devices can essentially hunt, and it's difficult sometimes for them to coordinate under very specific scenarios, as well as they have impacts to neighboring feeders on the same bus. Volt-var optimization really centralizes that approach, brings all this telemetry into a centralized location on that associated model, allows the system to run various different calculations and formulas and optimize the operation of these devices holistically as one, so that all parts of the system are being accounted for when a solution is identified. This reduces customer energy usage, as well as reduces the potential of Rule 2 violations, which are voltage violations for our customers, essentially improving power quality, and improves the operational efficiency of the devices by minimizing these devices over operating and undue wear and tear actually on the switching mechanisms for these devices. Next slide, please. Load flow state estimation utilizes various different physics and electrical calculations to calculate throughout our system voltage, power flows, losses, and phase angles and VAR flow. This allows us to have visibility in areas where we don't currently have telemetry, and it utilizes our telemetry and matches that load flow to actually derive and get not only our real-time telemetry to match with the core fundamentals of the physics properties of the system. This actually enables the other applications to perform their advanced analysis, and this will be an enabler for volt-var optimization and other applications that I'll mention. Next slide, please. We're also looking at improving and implementing load forecasting capabilities actually into the ADMS platform itself. This will leverage, again, information coming from SIME and LoadSeer and some of the enhancements that my colleagues have mentioned already, and essentially to provide this visibility in the ADMS platform so when we run load flow, we can do a look ahead, and then that will influence the decisions that the automation and the applications recommendations those applications are driving, so that it minimizes those applications coming up with a solution that could present an inherent risk and operational risk going forward in the future. Next slide. Looking at engineering analysis, there's several applications that are at our disposal, but we really wanted to focus on the areas of VAR regulation and capacitor and voltage regulator placement. This further strengthens and is a narrative, again, to support volt-var optimization at PG&E and will help help our engineering organization look at real-time telemetry as well as our VAR optimization solutions and identify opportunities for placing new devices, again, supporting power quality of our system and to our customers and delivering a better experience for our customers. Next slide, please. Another area where we're investing is protection analysis, very similar to VAR optimization and what has been mentioned prior in the SIME and presentation. Coordination of replaying devices is done by our protection team, usually when there is load growth on a feeder or when they're doing an expansion of a feeder. This will help bring these analyses into the real-time environment. And while devices and load rolls are occurring on the system to support real-time operations, we'll provide you a real-time analysis of how our protection system is coordinated and identify if there's any protection gaps, preventing potentially overload conditions as well as reducing the risk of equipment failure. Again, all in the veins of supporting a more reliable system and a better customer experience. Next slide, please. And then turning to field switching and digital transformation. Again, this is a tool that provides ADMS style functionality visibility actually in the field, allows us to leverage our digital switch writing solutions that we're currently developing in ADMS and be able to provide us the capabilities of doing paperless switching in the field in our future GRC filing, as well as enhances visibility and oversight of field operations, improve safety through visibility of where our field crews and what steps our field crews are on with the distribution operators and the grid control centers, as well as increases lines of communication, allowing both the field and the control center to see the same information at the same time and providing the field crews with better situational awareness. Slide. That's all I have planned for today. Happy to take any questions at this time.
We have a question in the chat from Tom Roberts regarding ADMS release. The first question, have you completed all SCADA endpoints back to the operator ADMS display screens and data archive? If not, ETA. Number two, how long will RT SCADA remain available to distribution operator as a backup? So 2 questions.
Yeah. Great questions. Thank you for those, Tom. So yes, the SCADA functionality is 100% cut over on the ADMS platform, and the operators are utilizing that solution today. We have validated all of the signal and control points, and we have rebuilt where needed the control screens that were originally in RT SCADA. And I say it as needed because we did not rebuild everything. We again performed an analysis of what screens needed to be rebuilt and which screens were eligible for retirement. I believe that answers question number 1. Question number 2, RT SCADA and RT SCADA retirement. We could get back to you on that answer. From a control room perspective and having RT SCADA as a backup for the operators, that functionality no longer exists. We've essentially retired RT SCADA from a control room perspective, and we no longer have RT SCADA as a quote-unquote backup. That was available back in the pilot. We did maintain both systems, but since now we have gained confidence with our system and we've fully cut over the SCADA system onto ADMS, that backup, RT SCADA is not being maintained and is no longer a backup. RT SCADA that will remain for a while longer because it is leveraged on some of our RTU servers and the maintenance and management of our RTUs coming in from the field, and it needs to be cut out in those environments and transitioned onto, and those RTUs need to be transitioned onto a new solution. So for those reasons, RT SCADA will remain for a while longer, even though it's not necessarily being used as a control system. Any other questions?
I see one hand raised by Gabe.
Thanks, Chris. My question goes back to the earlier slide that showed the 3 stages of complete, in progress, and planned. I don't know if that can be brought back up. So my question starts with in the introductory presentation, Bill Peters emphasized PG&E's priority on containing costs for customers, which I think we can all agree is a very important goal right now, as bills have been rising at a rate that's uncomfortable for a lot of customers. And specifically, the distribution portion of the revenue requirement of GRCs is increasing at a strong rate. So I know that Alex said that it's hard to quantify, specific cost savings associated with specific investments. But whether you could be either quantitative or qualitative, could you give us an example in each of these columns of an investment that can lead or has led to a reduction, in bill cost for an everyday customer? That would be my question.
Yeah, sure. Let me try to tackle that. That's a great question. So with the column 1, I'll focus on the SCADA and the reduction in. Well, hold on. Let me give you another example. All right, I'm just going to switch here. So for column 1, I mentioned Flizzer's not explicitly listed here. It's listed in the second column, but Flizzer was deployed, as I mentioned, in 2023. Flizzer, for example, prior was on our Yukon feeder automation solution. That solution, because it wasn't integrated, had to have a separate maintenance cycle and was maintained separately from RT SCADA. And both systems had different maintenance cycles, as well as they were duplicative in their the databases. So when you deploy the Flizzer scheme, when you had that legacy RT SCADA product, you had to actually reprogram in a lot of ways all the control points in the Yukon feeder automation system, and you had to build a quasi model that wasn't being updated systematically by our GIS system because it had no tie-ins with any of the other platforms. In addition to that, because of its scalability, it required several servers to run and be able to support our existing deployments. And because of all this manual programming, it required, on average, we looked at internally, about 40 hours just from a SCADA perspective to program a Flizzer scheme. With the ADMS and integrated approach, we've been able to eliminate many of those servers, the maintenance of them, the overhead of them, as well as consolidate the maintenance of the applications into the consolidated platform. And because all this information is now being synchronized and updated, and because the model is already there and we're not reprogramming a lot of existing points, we've been able to reduce, again, your typical deployment time for a Flizzer from the pure SCADA side down to 4 hours. Looking at, let me pick one for the middle column. Line sensor integration. Line sensor integration is kind of the same story. The way those were implemented is it was because of the limitations of RT SCADA, it was counter data flow, where we had essentially 3 servers sitting in between the transform server and the coordination server that came in from the field, and it went through various different conversions into our historian system, and then went counter data flow back into our RT SCADA system because of those limitations, where in our OMS system, existing OMS system, our ABB product, where custom screens had to be developed to provide visibility of where these line sensors were and give operators, again, insight to what those sensors were providing. With the ADMS solution and its capabilities, not only are those custom screens no longer needed because ADMS has a reference of that model and that GIS information embedded, we are now able to bring those in as any other SCADA asset through the front door, eliminating several, about 2 to 3 protocol conversion servers that sit in the middle, align the line sensors with our existing data flow of our other assets, and eliminate all those custom and customization screens and their associated maintenance. And again, saving, again, operational costs essentially. And then for the third column, load flow state estimation is going to deliver, and the associated applications is going to again deliver that higher level situational awareness, not only at the points where we're measuring today, but on the points that we already don't have measurements in the middle, which is going to allow us through applications and automation to operate the system more efficiently. And I've really liked how, again, when I believe Alex put this best, it's really enabling that throughput of our existing system, allowing us to do more with our existing wires and lines that we have today, because now we have better situational awareness and how the system is performing between the SCADA points, and not having to have a larger deployment of SCADA sets to gain that same level of visibility through legacy means. Great question. Thank you. Sorry, that was a big question.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Chris, if you don't mind, I'll also add that volt VAR optimization will actually lead to lower customer bills through the principle of conservation voltage reduction. This is the idea that, and what we aim to achieve through VVO is, supplying customers with voltage at the lowest allowable end of the ANSI voltage range. Through just the physical properties of electricity, that means that customers will be using less energy. That is a core value proposition of the VVO program that we're proposing, and the ADMS solution at large, is to be able to unlock, potential reductions in customer bills through volt VAR optimization.
Yeah, and that comes in twofold. Thanks, Tara, for that. It not only lowers the voltage, so their power consumption essentially is lower, but it also corrects the VAR flow, so that the appliances and equipment that our customers have will actually operate more efficiently, because as the VAR flow goes up, they operate less efficiently, and it generates excess heat in those equipments and appliances and mechanical devices.
Okay, we see no more hands or questions in the chat.
All right, thank you. So with that, we'll turn it over to Salma to speak about DERMS. Go ahead, Salma.
Hi, Salma, if you're speaking, we can't hear you.
You are very, very low. We can't really hear you. Not really, no. No. Is there another? It's very faint. Are you able to maybe dial in from your phone? No. Still faint. Sorry, I didn't catch that.
Can you guys hear me or not yet?
It's still very faint. Would you try dialing in from your phone?
I'm using my computer. Should I dial from my phone?
If you can dial in from your phone, that might be better.
Yeah, because I thought we tried with the video check-in yesterday and it worked well. Sorry about that.
Sorry, folks.
Can you get?
Yes, but it sounds like you probably need to mute one
Yeah.
of your devices.
Yes, I did. Is this better?
There's an echo still, or is someone else, if someone else is off mute, could you mute yourself?
I hope that this is better.
Sama, you need to mute one of your device. Yes, thank you.
Okay, is this better?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Because we tried the audio check-in yesterday and it worked well, so I'm not sure what happened. I'm sorry about losing a few minutes. I hope you guys can hear me well right now. Is this all good?
Yes, please go ahead.
Perfect, thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm sorry about the delay. There's always technical issues, even if we try and check that beforehand. Sorry about that again. I'm Salma Bakr, a principal product manager on the Clean Energy Technology Platforms team. As part of my role, I lead the DERMS product strategy, long-term roadmap, and emerging opportunities. Next slide, please. Thank you, Jessica. Let me start by acknowledging that the deployment of DERMS has been accelerated, and what we've accomplished thus far is thanks to this acceleration. On this slide, I'll go through where we've been, where we're at, and what the future of DERMS looks like in the next GRC. Since our enterprise DERMS platform launched in 2023, we've been deploying foundational capabilities to manage and control DERs and hence create value to our grid, the energy system, and our customers. Thus far, we've deployed our DERMS platform, including a DER headend for IEEE 2030.5. To comply with Rule 21, we've deployed 28 customer-owned telemetry sites for DERs 1 megawatt and above. The first operational flexibility use cases we've deployed is our Flexible Service Connection Program, or Flex Connect, where DERMS provides customers with operating flexibility above their planning limit. Basically, in Q4 of last year, we started operating 2 Flex Connect sites, which have added to date around 1,300 megawatt hours of new load. On the transportation electrification front, DERMS has enabled program management capabilities for 2 of our VGI pilots, specifically EV managed charging, for vehicle to everything, pilots for residential and commercial customers. And we'll talk more about VGI in terms of EV managed charging later. Additionally, we've implemented capabilities to make the flexible capacity of 2 of our market integrated demand response programs visible in the distribution control center. And in doing this, adding such flexibility to the toolbox of our distribution operations teams and making it readily available for a potential dispatch in case of distribution grid constraints. This year and next year, we're focusing on scaling our Flex Connect program geographically and across 4 customer types, and continuing to deploy foundational grid management and program management capabilities to broaden the portfolio of DER management use cases enabled by DERMS, specifically with features for EV managed charging and DER orchestration. As an example, we're supporting multiple EPIC projects with their current and future technology needs to ensure that such projects yield scalable solutions in managing DERs and creating value to our grid and our customers. And I'll share example EPIC projects we're supporting in a few slides. And this is a good segue into our next focus area in 2025 and 2026 around developing a minimum viable product for a virtual power plant in South Bay during summer months. That area has many overloaded transformers, and the capacity of certain substations is at risk. So to help our South Bay customers experience fewer and shorter outages, we're supporting our South Bay delivery team by providing the technology capabilities to dispatch DERs and demand response flexibility as well in that area during either planned or unplanned outages. I'd like to note that making demand response flexibility available to alleviate distribution grid constraints has been made possible by the work we've done last year, the one that I just mentioned, by making DR megawatts visible to distribution operations. So it's not a fully automated end-to-end process yet, but we're incrementally and iteratively working on making this possible. With regards to the DERs targeted in this MVP, those are resources also investigated under multiple EPIC projects, which really shows that we're all synergizing our efforts to stack the value of DERs while ultimately benefiting our customers and our grid. And speaking on the same note of summer reliability and moving on to our next focus area under the current GRC, is using DERMS to dispatch DERs as non-wires alternatives to defer distribution capacity upgrades and provide load relief during summertime. We have an NWA site coming online this month as well. It's a large battery providing summer relief, summer load relief in Bakersfield, and we're analyzing other potential NWA sites as well, benefiting from a dispatch via DERMS. Moving on to the longer term capabilities under the next GRC, we continue focusing on scaling Flex Connect and further operational flexibility use cases, as well as NWAs. Also working on scaling vehicle grid integration use cases, including capabilities for EV managed charging and V2X, building on previous learnings and from past and current and upcoming pilots and projects as well. We also see DERMS playing a big role in enabling virtual power plants by orchestrating a portfolio of DERs across different modes of engagement and operations to solve one or multiple grid needs, and thus underscoring value stacking of DERs. We're also looking into integrating DERMS with grid edge computing devices. At the moment, we're testing our AMI 2.0 meters with distribution intelligence to avoid overloading on secondary distribution circuits, and thus avoiding panel upgrades and service upgrades in general by optimizing hyper-locally. In this case, for EV managed charging, and I'll touch in a few slides upon the actual EPIC project working on that. Via DERMS, we can take grid edge computing steps further, and we're looking to do that in the next GRC by expanding use cases on secondary distribution circuits and into primary distribution circuits as well to solve distribution grid needs while offering a streamlined experience to our customers as well. Another key area of focus for DERMS is, and in coordination with other platforms as well, is coordinating data sharing between transmission and distribution to make sure that we can operate an electrified and high DR grid in a reliable and resilient manner. Next slide, please.
Just before we move on, there is a question from Gabe. When you say current GRC, you're referring to the approved 2023 GRC that covers
yes
through 2027 or through 2026, excuse me.
Yes, still end of year 2026. Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, I'm still not clear. By current, do you mean the one that's about to be filed, or is that the next GRC as you refer to it?
So the next GRC is under the longer term capabilities. So that's 27 till 30. When I say current GRC, I mean the one which has been already approved until the end of 2026.
The 2023 GRC that covers the 2023 to 2026
exactly.
cycle.
Okay, so next GRC refers to the one that you're actually about to file in May of this year.
Correct.
Yes. Any other questions?
There's a question from June, Woon Jung. Will the reduced operational costs from consolidated platform, such as minimizing server-to-server transfers, will be reflected in GRC application?
So I'll speak about the benefits of DERMS in more details in a few slides, which include operational efficiencies and avoided IT costs as well. So I'll touch upon that in a later slide. We're including all of our benefits on DERMS in the GRC and speaking about how we think DERMS does enable PG&E to reduce rates and in several ways.
Okay.
I have one more question actually to you. From this slide, I see that the next GRC integrates DERMS with the grid edge computation platform. So the grid edge computation platform is under DERM or under AMI 2.0?
No, that's in another chapter under the AMI 2.0 filing. That's we work together internally, and we see value in doing that to provide an end-to-end experience for our customers and link that experience with distribution operations as well. This grid mod vision is a broader vision of how all of those systems can modernize our grid, but specifically AMI 2.0 is under another chapter. We do link AMI 2.0 with our work here because it is relevant, and we do work with those stakeholders and those internally as well.
So my understanding is the grid modernization is including terms, but not the AMI 2.0, which is another chapter outside of the grid mod chapter, right?
Yes, we refer to it, but it's under another chapter. Yes, but it's a core part of modernizing our grid.
So is it in a way in the future, are you planning to include AMI into the grid mod chapter, or?
I think this is a good question. We can definitely discuss and think about that, because it does make sense. But again, it's an open question.
We do have a dedicated Q&A session for this section once Selma gets through the slides. So I need to move on to the next slide.
Thank you, Jessica. So on this slide, I'll share an illustrative example of a live Flex Connect site and highlight also the resulting benefits for another site. So two different examples. One, a live site, like a screenshot from some DERM screen, and another one, the benefits from an EV fleet site, which is a different customer. But just wanting to share the different flavors of what we're doing in DERMS here. So on the right-hand side, are screenshots from a live DERM system for a Flex Connect customer. This is a battery operating on the wholesale distribution tariff. In the graph at the top, in the different shades of blue, is the 72-hour flexibility schedule sent by DERMS to the battery, as well as site and planning limits. So starting from the light blue line at the bottom, this is the planning load limit, which is the site limit before Flex Connect. The blue line at the very top is the full load limit enabled by DERMS via Flex Connect. And that curve, the calculated load limit curve, is the schedule DERMS sends to the customer and is comprised of the different dynamic site limits needing to be followed by the battery as sent by DERMS. As you see here, the planning limit used to be 2 megawatts, and now it's up to 6 megawatts, with a schedule oscillating around give or take 5 megawatt of capacity. This schedule is sent by DERMS a day ahead, so 24 hours ahead to the customer, and it's a 72-hour window, and it gets updated. It gets sent every day so that the battery is ready to bid into the market based on that schedule accordingly. In the graph below is the actual behavior of the battery in yellow. As you can see, the battery is charging during midday and during off-peak hours at night, and it's discharging during the peaks in the morning and the evening. On the left-hand side here, I'll share some of the benefits for a different Flex Connect site and customer. This is an EV fleet of Tesla semi-trucks. This site was limited to 3 megawatts of charging from 9 p.m. to 3 a.m. and had no capacity during all other hours. Those limits were in place while the customer awaits for the long-term distribution grid upgrade to be completed. Via Flex Connect, it was possible for DERMS to help this customer to connect earlier, around 18 months earlier, and such faster energization is helping the customer reduce around $1 million in fuel costs and around 8,000 tons of CO2 of emissions. The year-to-date site benefits include DERMS providing the customer with additional flexibility around 90% of the time. 91% of the time, the customer is able to use more than 325 megawatt hours of energy above the planning limit at an average of around 2.7 megawatts of limit increase, which has helped the electric fleet drive around 162K miles. Next slide, please. Thank you, Jessica. This slide provides an overview of DERMS in the next GRC. So again, just to clarify, the 27 to 30 GRC, the one that we're filing in May. Where DERMS capabilities and benefits will stem from scaling PG&E's Flex Connect program and VGI via managed charging and V2X, and orchestrating and value stacking DERs into virtual power plants, also integrating DERMS with grid edge computing and coordinating data sharing between transmission and distribution. Such capabilities and benefits will equip PG&E to operate an electrified and high DER grid in a safe, reliable, and optimized manner at affordable rates to our customers. It's important to mention that most of these focus areas are currently being investigated in multiple EPIC projects and various pilots as well. And I'll share more about specifically the EPIC projects in a couple of slides. In 2027 and beyond, the DERMS product strategy and roadmap will focus on 5 key areas. The first is further scaling our Flex Connect program and adding more NWA projects and other operational flexibility use cases across multiple customer types, 800 feeders and 20 concurrent internal PG&E users across our distribution load management operations team. This will help customers energize faster and bridge until upgrades. It will help us as well improve the asset utilization of our grid and increase its energy throughput. The second focus area for DERMS in 2027 and beyond is scaling VGI via managed charging and vehicle to everything by maturing grid and program management capabilities to support our VGI strategy, as well as working on making real-time pricing reflect grid conditions. So we forecast managing up to 300 megawatts of load via VGI with the objective of avoiding or deferring distribution asset upgrades like service transformers, for example, providing load relief and freeing up capital for other critical infrastructure projects. The third area of focus is developing virtual power plants to solve grid needs by aggregating and orchestrating a portfolio of DERs, providing multiple grid services across multiple modes of engagement. So we envision that such virtual power plants will help us stack DER value per megawatt and better shape our evolving role as a distribution system operator. The fourth area of DERMS in 2027 and beyond is integrating DERMS with grid edge computing, optimizing hyper locally at secondary distribution circuits, and thus connecting the centralized distribution control center with customers to help expand our current grid edge computing use cases and also extend distribution grid alleviations to primary circuits based on DERMS controls. So to ultimately unlock different benefits to the grid and enable a more streamlined end-to-end experience for our customers as well. The fifth focus area highlighted here is reliability coordination and data sharing between distribution and transmission to ensure resilient and reliable grid operations in an electrified and high DER future. Next slide, please. Thank you, Jessica. This slide covers the current and future benefits of DERMS. On the left-hand side are the benefits of the EP Fleet Flex Connect site already mentioned earlier, which are a flavor of our grid-centric benefits of DERMS. And complementing those are the overall benefits of DERMS on the right-hand side here, including grid-centric benefits and program-centric benefits, creating value to PG&E, our customers, and the society and broader economy. We see DERMS presenting a unique opportunity for PG&E to bring down rates by increasing energy throughput with the same infrastructure. So for example, via Flex Connect, where we provide customers with operational flexibility, bridging, and faster energization at scale. DERMS also presents an opportunity to free up capital for other projects by deferring distribution upgrades via NWAs and VGI. Also, we see DERMS helping create more value per megawatt of load managed by improving existing programs or adding new capabilities only possible via DERMS. There are other benefits of DERMS, including avoided IT costs, for example, and this touches upon the consolidation we've mentioned earlier. So DERMS capabilities can be leveraged instead of relying on multiple different tools and platforms, and so basically helping consolidate products and services to manage DERs via one platform. Also improved operational efficiencies, especially by saving coworkers time in creating reports, responding to audits, and conducting measurement and verification. Furthermore, we see DERMS creating societal and economic benefits by helping avoid greenhouse gas emissions, by managing and optimizing our high DER grid, which integrates several renewable sources. And DERMS also helps boost economic productivity by providing increased flexibility and DER management options to cater to our customers' evolving energy and business needs. Next slide, please. Thank you. So in this slide, and this is the last slide actually, and then we'll jump into Q&A for all those with questions. In this slide, I'd like to highlight examples from PG&E's current R&D portfolio, which serve as a learning opportunity to anchor our grid modernization vision and inform PG&E's investments across distribution planning tools, ADMS, DERMS, and grid edge computing as well. Before I dive into the EPIC projects included here, I'd like to underscore past EPIC projects that have helped shape PG&E's platform today. So for example, in EPIC 2.02, PG&E developed a DERMS pilot to identify DERMS requirements for utility deployment, which led to creating relevant ADMS requirements and vendor decisions as well. In EPIC 3.03, PG&E built the first utility production headend in California for IEEE 2030.5 and overcame many initial barriers to deployment. And such learnings were instrumental in developing a foundational communications and medium for telemetry and controls in our DERMS platform today. Moving on to the actual portfolio of EPIC projects. So again, on this slide is just a few examples from the many projects and pilots we are conducting as part of our R&D portfolio at PG&E. I'll be sharing only a few examples from many efforts, helping to help shape our grid modernization vision and investments. From let's start from I have them by numbers just in numerical order here. In EPIC 4.02, socket of the future and residential single-family home energy EV charging. In this project, there are two tracks, and the project focuses on coordinating and optimizing the behavior of home electric loads using grid edge technology to limit the charge rate within real-time grid capacity to avoid upgrades and upgrading panels or service upgrades in general. The first track focuses on implementing this for home EV charging. The second track looks at expanding to other loads and including smart panels as well. In this project, we're trying to understand the possibilities of using grid edge computing to optimize hyperlocally and learn how this can stream customers' experience in electrification and DER enablement and expand to further use cases as well. In EPIC 4.04, EV managed charging for distribution asset deferrals. In this project, the charging of residential EV chargers is managed and controlled to mitigate service transformer upgrades and overloading, and thus helping defer upgrades of transformers and providing load relief. This project is key in understanding the benefits of EV managed charging and how it shapes PG&E's VGI strategy and identifying pathways to scaling EV managed charging as well. EPIC 4.08, we've already touched upon that project. Non-wires alternatives integration into distribution planning. This project evaluates the impact of combining load flexibility, DERs, and wires in distribution planning forecasts and the feasibility of incorporating different solutions in that process. And again, we've already touched upon that earlier as part of the distribution planning part. 4.09, advanced load management analytics and aggregated customers on distribution circuits. We refer to them as ALMA, one letter short of SELMA, and ACDC. So this project has two tracks. One track focuses on developing a grid simulator to analyze various grid stressor scenarios to inform grid investments and decarbonization targets. The second track investigates the potential of DER aggregations in dynamically shaping load on distribution circuits, which would inform how we develop and scale our virtual power plants moving forward, especially those enabled by aggregators. 4.10, local DER orchestration. This project investigates how to best optimize the behavior of different DERs, providing various grid services across multiple modes of engagement to solve one or multiple grid needs. This project will help us understand, for example, how to meet a distribution grid need by optimizing a portfolio of multi-vendor and multi-technology DERs operating across different modes of engagement. So think, for example, bilateral agreements, rate design, pricing and control signals, and so on. Again, we envision that this project will help us learn how to develop and scale our virtual power plant now and in the future. Transmission and distribution co-simulation, EPIC 4.21. So this project co-simulates transmission and distribution systems simultaneously to inform transmission planning processes, run planning optimizations across T&D, and optimize the use of current and future T&D capacity. This project will help us shape how we think about distribution and transmission together to better operate and optimize a high DR and electrified grid in a resilient, reliable, and safe manner at affordable rates to our customers. This brings us to the end of this presentation, the end of this section as well. Thank you all, and hand it over to you, Jessica. Any questions though? So this is the Q&A.
Yeah, there is a question from Sydney. Can you speak more about the role of AMI in grid edge computing and its integration with DERMS? Specifically, what types of decision will be made at the centralized DERMS versus decentralized smart meters?
So again, this is work that still needs to be done. We haven't done that work. We still need to do that work, and hence mentioning it as part of what we're filing in the next GRC for 27. So again, there are a lot to consider. There's a lot of thought that needs to go into this. Again, we are conducting a lot of R&D efforts to try to understand the benefits and scale of grid edge computing. And then, but ultimately, we need to think about, and hence a key focus area for DERMS as well as AMI 2.0, to think about how to integrate from a customer experience perspective and internally as well in terms of processes, how to link grid edge with DERMS, with AEMS, such that it's a holistic end-to-end process that creates value to our customers and our internal operations as well. So again, it's still work that needs to be done.
Okay.
If I could just add one, maybe underscore one point related to this exploration that we're undergoing. I think it's important to note that the problem being solved at different levels in the system, requires different solutions. So, for example, what we're looking at, with our initial use cases around AMI 2.0 is how do we help a customer get connected on a limited service that might have a panel limitation. A centralized DERMS isn't going to help manage that type of localized constraint and at a customer premise. And so we believe that that's the best. If we want to solve the problem closest to where the challenge exists on the grid or in a customer premise, and then we would layer up from there. So I think that there's going to be multiple different points of interaction between edge systems and centralized DERMS systems, just like there are different levels of interaction with customers depending on whether it is our interactions with them are through an aggregator or through an OEM technology provider or directly connected to them via telemetry devices. So I think the architecture that we're building toward is flexible, such that we can operate in and integrate with both the internal systems that we're developing, but also with external kind of parties that are part of the ecosystem of DER management.
Got it. Thank you. And we have another question from German Cole from EDF. The question is, what are the 4 customer types for which PG&E plans to expand access to the Flex Connect program in the midterm?
Yeah, so we're looking at EV charging, DC fast chargers. That's one customer type. Those can be public or private. We're also looking at batteries, so large scale batteries. That's another type. And we're looking at C&I customers. So again, it really depends on the total addressable market and what we want to focus on in terms of value creating for those customers. So we're still exploring the personas as well of those customers. But essentially, this is what we've done so far. the examples I've provided, and we're looking at, I think, landfill, C&I customers as well.
And I would just note again to underscore, like that's our very near-term goal is to diversify the customer types, and the aspiration, and I think this is being discussed in a couple of the other policy venues around the energization OIR and the high DER OIR, of what would it take for this to be a standard offering such that any new interconnecting customer could be offered a bridging solution. And so that's certainly the aspiration. And, you know, we're working through the details, both the technical details and also the kind of customer, you know, adoption in different customer classes to build toward a standard solution.
Got it. Okay, thank you. We have a question from Woon Jung. Can you share the compensation framework for DERs with a plural? Do incentives vary by time and location to align with grid constraints?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Can you share the compensation framework for DERs? Do incentives vary by time and location to align with grid constraints?
So
maybe I can take a first, sorry, Selma, maybe I could take a first crack at kind of like, within our GRC and within this grid mod chapter, we are not articulating a perspective or identifying a business model associated with these capabilities. So the programs and incentives that exist today, there are a lot of different types of programs and incentives that exist today, whether that's pilot pricing program, demand response programs, the DIDIF investment deferral framework compensation mechanism. But this GRC case is not making or advocating on a particular business model or incentive structure. However, we are anticipating that there will be a diverse set of programs and incentive types by which that will materially impact local distribution grid conditions, that will also provide new opportunities for us to more efficiently manage the system, you know, as we said, kind of increase the throughput of the system, defer investments or prolong asset lifetime on existing investments. And so we're building technology platforms that will be flexible and able to communicate whatever those signals or incentive structures that come to be in the near term. Selma, do you have anything else to add?
I think also like energizing faster, for example, in Flex Connect, this is already a benefit, direct benefit to customers. So faster energization. And from our perspective, we benefit from the increased asset utilization, increased throughput. We're like, again, it depends on also like the use cases enabled by DERMS. Who is the stakeholder internally also in PG&E? Is this a program? Is this a tariff that needs to be filed? Is this like something that, you know, we're trying and want to move to a standard offering? Again, we're not taking benefits for, like, we do not provide program incentives. We are the technology enablers to stand up that VPP program, for example, which unlocks benefits for customers, a part of which are incentives from a specific program or project.
Okay, and next we have a comment and a question from Harold Zoe. Zoe Harold. The integration of grid modernization and distribution management system capabilities with wildfire mitigation seems to focus on EPSS and PSPS response times. Mentions have also been made for dispatching DER on constrained feeders for summer reliability applications. However, no mention has been made regarding strategic deployment and management of BTM DER, i.e. DER solutions, to address the impacts of EPSS and PSPS on customers. So here's the question. Has PG&E considered DER and DER management application as a solution to address wildfire risk mitigation impacts and include this application in cost benefits assessments?
So we already have multiple resiliency and reliability programs installing behind the meter batteries for customers in wildfire threat areas. And those are actually existing programs for EPSS or PSPS impacted customers. What we're looking to do, though, is to try to understand how to get more value out of those batteries. So to understand, again, value stacking of DERs, this is something that we're considering internally. And like we can speak more about this maybe if needed, but there are efforts to expand the value of those DERs to solve for grid needs, as well as in addition to resiliency and reliability, again, and to expand those deployments to our customer base impacted, and to do more with less, basically. So again, this is something that will come also as part of another chapter and other teams as well in the company as part of the GRC.
Okay. All right, we have a next question from John Cortez. Can you provide more updates on PG&E's implementation of ADMS and DERMS to better utilize energy storage systems, both behind the meter and front of the meter? What is the status, i.e. fully integrated, in progress, etc.? Any major challenges that PG&E is facing in this area? Does PG&E plan to increase utility-owned energy storage? So a few questions here.
Multiple questions.
Yeah.
For the utility owned, I will defer to have this as part of the application in the GRC in another chapter. Yes, this is something we are considering, but again, I am not the person working on it. I'm not the expert on the topic, but I think we will see considerations for this as part of the next GRC. So that's one thing. Behind the meter and front of the meter batteries. So behind the meter would be a part of virtual power plants, behind the meter storage specifically. And again, this is work that we're conducting a minimum viable product for as part of the South Bay pilot for planned and unplanned outage reliability relief there. Behind the meter batteries would be part of that virtual power plant. Eventually, also as we scale and orchestrate more DERs, a portfolio of DERs to alleviate those grid constraints. From the meter batteries, so an example I already provided in one of our live sites coming online for NWA, as well as an existing site, the battery site I showed the graphs of. Those are two front of the meter batteries with different capacity. So if the challenges and the problems, the technical deployment problems, I would defer to other colleagues actually in the details in the weeds of the technicalities. But I would say, again, we are catering to a portfolio of DERs, front of the meter batteries, behind the meter, EV charging, and our existing demand response programs or new programs if this is something that we're looking to do as well. Anything to add from others on the call?
Yeah, I'd like to add. I'll just say that the ADMS system and the DERM system are tightly integrated. And so Chris talked about the deployment of and the live SCADA. So all of the measurements, all of the system configurations, all of that live in our ADMS as the system, as operated system. And that is passing information on to DERMS, which is doing advanced forecasting, which is communicating out to third-party devices. So these are tightly integrated systems. The status of DERMS, though, whereas ADMS is deployed on 100% of our 3,200, give or take, feeders, the DERMS system is deployed and modeled on, I think it's a bit under 200 feeders today. And the reason for that is we want to be prudent in deploying these new capabilities to where they add specific value. And so, and that's part of the scaling strategy is we're not putting it everywhere. That would be, before we have value creating opportunities on specific locations, that would be cost prohibitive. So the status is that they are integrated systems. The strategy of deploying DERMS as a separate platform from ADMS allows us to be much more adaptable to an emerging space and integrate, for example, with new types of resources.
Okay. Next, also just to let everyone know, now is the time. If you have questions, please put it in the chat or raise your hand. So we're like kind of running to the open discussion. Yeah, but you guys already start asking questions, so I didn't want to interrupt. So I have a question from Anthony. I understand some of the DERMS benefit regarding orchestration may be difficult to estimate due to uncertainties about business model, etc. But can PG&E share if it intends to provide such saving data, either cost savings thus far or estimate over the next 5 years for other enable function, such as the ones you touch on the ADMS presentation, Voltar, Flizzr, line sensor, etc., or others? This is likely the type of information that may be requested from PG&E in discovery if data in the GRC is not sufficient. Overall, I would say we haven't seen as much cost-saving data from grid mod investment implemented thus far that may already be producing savings and may be easier to estimate. So basically, he's saying that he hasn't seen a lot of data for cost estimate or cost saving.
I think that we could take that as a point of input, and we will try to quantify benefits where those benefits can be quantified today, both retrospectively and prospectively.
There is a question in between the comment that can PG&E share if it intends to provide such saving data?
I can jump in here really quick. In the last, for previous GRCs, we have, included analysis of the reliability and operational efficiency benefits of ADMS. That's part of the record from the last 2 rate cases. We have not performed new benefit analysis since then, but, our feeling is that analysis holds. I would encourage everybody to keep in mind that we're, still in the process of implementing ADMS, and many of the applications that will yield these benefits are, not released into production yet. So we don't have actual data to measure. For example, like a lot of the reliability benefits of ADMS are expected to accrue as a result of the, release to OMS functionality. That's projected to be released into production in 2026. So, some of this is still in the works. You mentioned Voltar optimization. That's a new area where we will have some cost benefit data to point to in our filing.
Okay. So, okay. So he said thanks. Do I have any raised hands and chat? I don't see any for now.
Gabe has his hand raised.
Oh, okay. All right. Hi, Gabe.
Yeah, thanks. I'm not attempting to end the workshop if people want to continue talking, but this might be my last comment or question. So I really appreciate that, PG&E, Alex started out by saying, this is a window for feedback before the GRC is filed. And, if I could sort of sum up sort of overarching perspective here, it's become apparent perhaps that the team that is responsible for presenting and operationalizing the grid mod technologies is not necessarily the same team that drives the value creation that is built upon those technologies. And so you're in a position of having to present the rationale for the investments, but someone else seems to be responsible for capitalizing on those investments. And it does create a challenge, I think, for the GRC, almost like a split screen situation where you look at one screen, you see a very compelling set of arguments for some really interesting technologies that seem to hold a lot of promise and really do seem like they could really benefit. But on the other hand, the other screen, you see the CapEx for distribution just going up. And it's almost like a disconnect. And so it's like, we can be both optimistic and open-minded to the grid modernization investments, but at the same time, we have to be, wary of the growing capital revenue requirement for distribution and wondering, like, when are we going to start seeing that come down? And so I just wanted to share that as a perspective. I thought this was a really interesting presentation. I saw a lot of great ideas, a lot of cool technology that does seem like it could really make a difference. But I just, think you're probably already aware that there is that kind of dual perspective, that there's both a interest and optimism, but also a almost, I wouldn't say freak out, but there's growing concern about rising rates and why distribution keeps going up. So that's sort of a glass half empty, half full comment, but I thought it'd be important to share and think about, as you present the GRC. And I'm, welcome any comments now and also when you file later.
I think it's maybe something that I appreciate the comment. I don't know that there's that we have a direct response to that, Gabe, but it is not lost on us. And I think, we are, as a company, laser focused on how do our investments reduce rates? And we will do the best we can on creating that quantification and the narrative around that within this rate case across the board, not just in grid mod.
Yeah, thanks. I think Anthony kind of put it well, the need to correlate investments to savings where possible.
Okay. Do we have any more comments and questions in the chat? Sorry, I'm sharing my screen, so I cannot see the chat or participant raising hand.
Anthony just added a comment, just thanking for the great presentation. And he
Right.
also concurs with Gabe about the need to start correlating investments to savings when possible.
Got it. Thank you for the comment.
Yeah, and I concur with the great presentation. Thank you very much for this discussion today.
All right. So since I have no more questions and comment, I would like to close this with thank you all for your time today. Your feedback is valuable in shaping PG&E's grid modernization plan for the GRC and the upcoming general rate case. As a reminder, PG&E will incorporate today's discussion into their GRC filing on May 15. We encourage your we encourage your continued support in the GRC process. And today's PG&E slide deck will be presentation will be uploaded to CPUC's Electric General Rate Case website in a week. It will be under the PG&E rate case. So for follow-up questions or comments, you may reach out to Energy Division of CPUC, Jessica C. from Grid Planning Group, myself, and Chris from the General Rate Case Group. So with that, we officially close today's workshop. Thank you again and have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
All right, bye.